All right, welcome everybody to today's live Q&A. I want to be doing these consistently throughout the group because I think you guys have such great questions. So I'm really happy you guys were able to post some thoughts. I'd love to help in any way that I can. And so today I want to share with you some ideas. A lot of people had relationship questions. Some people had individual ones. There's a lot of good things that you can do. I know the relationship side of things when it comes to repairing can feel tough, but there's a lot of good things that you can do. So I want to share some thoughts with you. And then on follow-up Q&As, I'm happy to answer the next steps and things that you guys want to touch on. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put the question on the screen. And it looks like when the questions are long, they cut them off. But this way, at least you can scrub through and listen to the ones that are relevant, skip the ones that are not. So, okay, I'll just read you the question here and I'll share with you a couple of thoughts. First one is, I need some help with not being so wrapped up in my emotions and feelings and when I should be concerned with my wife and the emotions that she's expressing. I tend to shut down and get angry because of how it makes me feel facing what I've put her through and how it's changed the way she sees me. There is 2 or 3 questions actually along these lines, so I just want to answer everybody's question here. So when this happens, this is natural. It's normal to be affected by the conversations that you have with your partner. If she's upset with you and she's speaking at you with anger or frustration, or you see her hurt, maybe she's just being vulnerable, but you know she's been affected by your decisions, it's going to hurt. It's tough. The difference, though, is we don't want to go into shame. We will feel remorse, of course. We will feel compassion. We will feel regret. That is different than shame. And when somebody gets stuck in their shame, that's when they get defensive. That's when they want to avoid the conversations. That's when we turn the tables. Like everything that we don't want to have happen typically results from us feeling that shame. And when I say shame, what I mean is if you see yourself as a bad person, if you see yourself as a failure, and that experience, the conversation you're having with your wife, shines this light on, well, I screwed up, I'm a bad person, that really doesn't sit well with anybody. Shame hurts. So naturally, we want to get away from it. We will get defensive, we'll explain, we'll rationalize, and have conversations that just aren't effective. So how do you deal with this then? Again, this is universal. There's 4 thoughts that I had. I wrote down some thoughts, and then I have a couple links that I want to share with you with some podcast episodes. The first one is recognizing what the actual problem is. Because if you don't clearly identify what's wrong or what the issue is, it's really tough to fix it. That's why I wanted to talk on shame today. So the first step is to do your shame work. So what do I mean by that? Shame is when you make it personal and your value is linked, or your worth, your value, your worthiness, feeling enough, when that's linked to your decisions, we are going to go into shame. When in reality, the decisions that you made don't reflect who you are at your core. The decisions that we make are a reflection of our experiences in life. Sometimes our decisions are in alignment with our values. Sometimes they're not. So a lot of guys, I think, struggle if they're struggling with any kind of sexual behavior and then it hurts their wife. They think, I'm a bad person because look what I've done. Good people don't do this. So it's really important to recognize that who you are is not a result, or is not, your worth, your value isn't a reflection of your decisions. It's our values that make up who we are as people. So if you make this decision and you see that it hurts your wife, that is out of alignment with your values. That doesn't fit for you. You're not okay with that. She's not okay with that. So that doesn't mean you're this bad person. It just means your decision wasn't in alignment with your values. So when you do this shame work, this is some of my favorite work when I do with people. So when I do sessions with guys who reach out for help, this is where we often start. There's a big struggle with guys taking it personally. So this is a part of how you can do this on your own, is to recognize you are not your decisions. In fact, I'll share with you a quick analogy. There was a guy that I worked with who had this perfect image to describe his experience. And early on, so he said, okay, I think about this pond. I think about a pond that my family and myself, we all go and hang around and we drink out of it, and that's our little home. He said when he first started working with me, he was in his shame, just like what we're describing here. He said He saw himself as the toxin. I'm the bad guy. Look what I've done. But after we did our work together and we were able to break those links and help him see things differently, he then came back to the analogy and said, I'm not the toxin. I just brought in the toxin. It's not who I am. I'm not the bad person. I made a bad decision, a bad series of decisions, but it's not who I am as a person. So I brought this toxin in. Therefore, there's things that I can do to get it out now. And that was the work that we did. We focused on him getting the tools that he needed to not only get himself into a good spot, to overcome the shame, overcome his triggers, change his patterns so he didn't keep acting out, and then also help him get tools to restore the relationship. So I really like that image because it's not who you are, it's something that you brought in, which is something that you can then work on and change. So I hope that helps. So number one, and by far the most important, shame work. Number two, yes, you will have feelings in connection to what she's saying. You're a human being, you care about her, so what she says is going to influence you. That's okay, that's normal. What we want to do, though, is expand your awareness from if all you feel is how bad I am as a person. Again, number one, we already talked about shame. But let's say you're not in shame, you just feel remorse and you feel regret. If you get absorbed by that feeling and are narrowing in on just your experience, then yeah, we get stuck there. But also keep in mind that how you feel about her is also there, but you're just not shining the spotlight on that. So typically guys feel bad, understandably so, because they don't want to hurt their wife. So they feel bad. That's all they can see. One really easy or simple step to help with this is to start to ask yourself the question, yes, I feel the way that I do, but how do I feel towards her? That's such a simple question, but it helps to change your spotlight focus from you to her. And when you do that, typically compassion is there. Typically there's empathy there. You care about how she feels. That is also present. But when we get stuck in our shame or just isolate how we feel, we exclude how we feel towards her. So that's the question I would encourage you to consider. And so this leads into number three. You can prepare for these conversations. Any professional athlete, Michael Phelps, Michael Jordan, Steph Curry, there's tons of professional athletes who focus on visualization prior to the game. And there's lots of good research that talks about how visualization has almost the identical effect as actually doing the activity. I remember hearing Michael Phelps, he will in his mind swim every stroke of the race prior to him even getting into the arena. And he does that over and over and over again because he trains himself and his body to respond so that when he's in the moment, he's already gone through the exercise. He already knows what to do. The same thing applies with this. When you visualize conversations with your wife and you see her in pain and you practice thinking, okay, how do I feel towards her? What's happening for her right now? You will train yourself to start to feel compassion and empathy when you see her in that state. So that would be my third recommendation. And there was another question that somebody posted. They said, okay, even when I am focused, I just don't know what to say. She's struggling. Anything that I try to say doesn't seem to help. I don't really know what to do. So then I just kind of stop talking. Here's what you say. All she needs in these moments is validation and acknowledgement. That's it. Well, okay, let me say it. Let me expand this a bit. That's 90%. The other part of it is helping her make sense out of how this happened. Both pieces are necessary, but when she's in her pain, almost all of what she needs is for you to validate her pain and acknowledge the impact that your decisions have caused. So that's all you have to say. So what are those words? So this is, okay, let's say my wife comes to me and she says, I can't believe we're here. I was going about my day. I was having a great day. And then I remembered something happened. I saw a TV show that just brought me right back to the moment that I found out all this stuff was happening. I just feel devastated. Okay, so what do you do? How do you respond to that? Here's one option. You can tell her, I see, it's just you're acknowledging her feelings and expressing validation or empathy. I understand that this is so hard for you. I can see how much this affects you, and this isn't fair. I recognize that you're struggling because of my decisions. And that kills me to know that this is something you're carrying because of me. Okay, so stepping out of the little role play here. That's just acknowledging, right? Acknowledging your pain, acknowledging your actions, reflecting back to her that you get it. This isn't okay. And she's hurting because of this. So that's one part of it. Then when you validate, you can say something like, I want you to know that this makes sense why you're in pain. And I really care about this. How you feel matters to me. I want you to know how much I care. These actions that you're referring to did not reflect the love that I have for you. And I feel awful because of that. That wasn't love. I really do care about how you feel. What you are saying to me right now matters. I just want you to know that you're not alone right now. Like, I'm with you. And this hurts. So you're basically, again, acknowledging and then expressing compassion, validating that this makes sense, recognizing why she's hurting, expressing comfort and care. When you do that, that's really what she needs. It doesn't have to be some complicated thing. It's just expressing your love for her, because those actions didn't reflect love. So now she has to make sense of, how am I married to this person who I thought loved me, but did this? Therefore, he can't, this isn't love. He must not love me. We want to help her make sense of it, but then validate that, there is sadness here. You care about that. She's not alone. That's the key. Fourth item here. I'm giving you a bunch of ideas to consider so that you can test them all, see which ones work for you specifically. The fourth thing here, when you guys are having these conversations, many times they don't go well because you're stuck in the negative communication cycle where there's defensiveness on your side, anger on her side, accusations, frustration. That's our protection. That's fight or flight. It just doesn't work well. So when she approaches you in frustration and anger, naturally your defenses are going to show up. Just like how if you approach her with defensiveness, her defenses will show up. Her frustration will come out. So how do you address this? Talk together outside of the moment. If you are trying to have a conversation with her when you're both in your protection, it just won't work. So you can prepare for those moments by talking ahead of time about how you want to have those talks. You're basically having a conversation about the conversation. So you could tell her, hey, when we have these conversations, I find that we often get stuck. I don't like that because it leaves you feeling like you're all alone. I don't want you to feel that. I really do care. And I know that when we get into our cycles, you don't feel of my care. I get defensive. I don't know what to do. So this is what I've noticed. When we get stuck in this negative cycle where there's frustration and anger and my defensiveness comes up, I can't be there for you and I want to. So when we talk about your pain, here's how I would love for this to go. I want to know how you're being impacted. I want to know what you're feeling. I want to know what you're struggling with so I can be there for you. It just, when it devolves into anger and tension and fighting, I have a really hard time there. So you can say something like that. And again, I could go into more detail, but instead of spending more time talking about this, what I'm going to do actually is copy and paste 2 podcast episodes in the chat. So right into the video, so I just posted them here. So that's one. And there's a second one. Oh, shoot. I'll post them separately because it just grouped them together. Here are 2 episodes that go into detail about these negative cycles and how you can break them. One really good step is to talk about the cycle outside of the moment. So when you're back in it, you guys can talk more on the feeling level instead of the accusation, frustration, anger level. It's, when I watched this movie, I saw this scene that brought up my hurt. And she tells you about the sadness, not how terrible of a person you are. That conversation will never work. There's a question, in fact, about that. Okay, let's go right into that. So here's the question. And then we'll bridge to this fourth tool that I wanted to share with you. Okay, question number 2. Oh, that's my... Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. Somebody posted, instead of sharing, when we have these conversations, instead of my wife sharing how she feels, she tells me how awful I am. For instance, or the example is, I've given myself brain damage, I'm an awful husband, I disgust her, etc. I'm learning to interpret these things as her way of telling me how much I've hurt her. And then he goes on to say, I have a hard time knowing how I can show up with boundaries in these conversations. She then will tell me, I'll never let you back into my heart. My real emotion underneath the anger, it is anger. And then his second question is it possible to have connecting conversations if I'm the only one trying? Okay. So this is what I was referring to. When wives or husbands, it doesn't matter who, when somebody's in pain and they accuse instead of share, it will never work. Never works. Because when she's in her protection, her wall is up. So it almost doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how much you try to, empathize and validate. That wall will filter out most of that. So going back to what I said earlier, it's so important to start to talk about this conversation outside of the moment. Because if you try to tell her, hey, honey, you're in your anger and I can't hear you right now, when she's mad, that'll make her even more mad. But if you outside of the moment, by listening to these 2 podcast episodes, get a sense together, right? I would encourage you to listen to these either together or separately, but talk about this, because this can be how you can have this conversation together before it happens. This is what you can tell her is, I want to support you. When we get stuck in this cycle, I'm not able to help you. And I don't want that, because I don't want you to be alone. So this conversation where she says you're an awful person just doesn't work. And that's where coming together on the same level is how you get out of the cycle. So again, best case scenario is that she can listen to these episodes with you. You guys can understand your cycle and change the dynamic. If that doesn't happen, there's still some things that you can do. I still think validating and acknowledging actually brings down the anger. It will be less effective if she's in a protection, but that really is your best bet. So if I were to give you the best case scenario, talk about the cycle and break it together, so that when she's hurting, you can talk on a different level. Best case scenario. If that can't happen for whatever reason, and she's in her anger, you can still try to validate and acknowledge and reach her by demonstrating that you care. Now, if that doesn't work, going back to this person here who says, my wife said that she'll never let me back into her heart. That I hear as a decision to wall off and stay walled off. The difficulty with that is that you cannot do this process alone. You cannot heal your marriage by yourself. We need her participation in the form of being open to receiving your efforts. So if she says, I will never let you back in, and her wall is up, it's a really tough spot to be. That may not stay that way. A part of how you can navigate that is by making sure you're in a good track. And I think you wrote in the group that you are in a good spot. I just condensed the question. You said that you're 16, 15 months sober. You feel good about who you are. You're in a different spot than where you were. I think that's step number 1. So if anybody's listening and you're not there yet, it's making sure you're solid. When you're solid and she's still not letting you back in, a part of what you can do is what we talked about, which is validating and acknowledging and really leaning into her pain and expressing care and concern and compassion for that. Now, if that doesn't work, now you're in this kind of last phase of the process. Or no, how do I say this? This is like best, middle, less than ideal situation, which is she will not receive your efforts. If you've tried everything else and you've been consistent, if you haven't, we start there, because that might sway or influence her to bring her wall down. If you've done your very, very best over a longer period of time, and she is just determined to say, I'm not doing this with you anymore, then I would have that conversation with her and say, what's our goal here? What are we going to do? What do you want to have happen with us? If she says, I'll never trust you again, then, okay, what are we doing? Are we cohabitating? Are we trying to work through this? If you can't trust me right now, that's okay. Are you open to working towards that? If she says no, 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 and all the doors are closed, then I think it's worth having a conversation with her. What's our intention then? Because then you get to have a say. Well, you get to have a say throughout the whole thing, but your say really does matter, especially here. Because if you're not okay with this arrangement of being in a relationship where her walls are up and she will not budge and she's decided that she'll never change and you won't get let back in, then I think you have to decide, how do you want to approach that? If that's where it lands. Again, that's like the last conversation I would have. I would do all this stuff first for a long period of time. I would get therapy. I would get support. I would do everything. And then if after everything she's like, nope, not doing this anymore, then you guys have to have a conversation to figure out what's going to happen between you two. And you get to decide. If she says, I just want to cohabitate, I want you to be here, I need you as a provider, but nothing beyond that, then you get to decide, are you okay with that? And if you say no, then you either have to rearrange that with her, or the relationship the dynamic or the arrangement needs to change. Tough situation. That's why I wanted to give you all this advice first to test, to then that's the last conversation I have. Okay. Next question. Let me post it for you guys. Okay. Another thing we struggle with is, how do we get out of the moments when my wife is triggered? If she does something that causes her to feel triggered, or if I do something that causes her to feel triggered, and she thinks I'm doing something like checking someone out at the store, for example, it's my instinct to try to convince her. Let me go to the next one. It's my instinct to try to convince her that I'm not, but she doesn't trust what I'm saying, so it ends up with both of us spiraling. What can I do in these situations to ease her anxiety and prevent the spiral from happening? Okay, great question. There's two things. Number one, as you've learned, defensiveness, explanations, logic, facts doesn't work. And the reason why is because she's here, not here. Logic and reason, when somebody else, we have to attune and calibrate off the other person. If she's trying to make sense of something, logic and reason and facts and laying this whole thing out is how you do that. When she's here in her fear and in her hurt, logic, it misses. So what do? Again, the good news is there's not a million tools you have to memorize, which is good. It's really just getting really good at doing a few. And the tool that I would refer you back to is the validating. In this case, I would just validate her and tell her. So again, let's say she approaches me. I'll just do a little role play. If these words fit for you, great. Make them your own as well if you'd like. But here's the principle is, she says, I can't trust you. I'm not going to tell her, honey, but I'm 30 days clean. Honey, but it's been 90 days. Honey, I don't even think about this stuff anymore. Oh, this girl, I didn't even notice her. It's guaranteed to fail. What I would say, I would start with, you may be able to add that after, though. We have to sequence it in the right order. If you lead with logic, it won't work. So what I would do if she says, hey, you were checking that lady out. Like, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? Why were you doing this? Again, I get the knee-jerk reaction is defend that. I would just say, well, I guess it depends on what she says. Checking someone out at the start. Yes. Okay. So she brings that up to you. Then I would say, I know this is really tough. This has got to be really hard for you right now. The fact that you're having to worry about who I'm looking at, and it leaves you in this position where you're scared and you're feeling hurt and reminded of all this stuff. This is an awful place for you to be. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I see that you're struggling, and I hate the fact that we're here. You shouldn't even have to worry about this. We're just simply at a grocery store, and now it's like you got punched in the stomach and you feel all this anxiety. I'm sorry. I'm sorry we're here. I would just start there. I would validate that. And then from there, I think you guys can have a conversation about, like, I get why you would be scared of that. I saw this person walk by. I do want you to know I'm in a good spot. I'm not upset. I'm not triggered. I'm not thinking about her. And I understand why you wouldn't believe that right now. So I'm not trying to convince, oh, I didn't even see her. I didn't even look. I would tell her that after you've already led with validation. But then I would validate afterwards. I get that you probably can't believe me right now, and I just feel awful that we're here. That piece, I cannot emphasize enough how critical validation is, because that speaks to the heart. If you spend 90% of your energy validating her, and then like trying to help her see, yeah, this is what happened for me. This is how I feel. I'm not triggered. I'm this. I'm okay. But you're speaking to her heart. That's how you can ultimately have those conversations successfully. Then what you want to do is show up in the relationship outside of those moments where you're demonstrating change. Because if you show her that you're a new person, if you show her that your heart is different, if you're following through on what you say you're going to do, if you have these check-in conversations where you say, "Are you okay? I know it's been a couple of days since we've spoken. How are you?" When you show her that you're different, those grocery store moments go way better than if you try to just only validate and tell her you're not doing it and not showing up outside of the moment. You want to couple those two things together. So again, it's not a magic bullet, right? If you tell her, "I get why you're struggling. This is hard. I'm sorry that we're here. I'm sorry that you have to even think about this right now." She's not going to feel like, "Oh, okay, great. I'm smiling now." Like, "Oh, you must be telling the truth now." It's not how those conversations go, but that's how you pad the conversations. That's the best option that you have. Then the extension of that moment is everything that happens afterwards. It's the whole day after, the whole week after, trying to support her so that when another triggering moment comes up, you've built this foundation of all the good work. You're showing her that you're different so that then this conversation not only goes better, but she'll actually feel it and receive your compassion instead of getting stuck in the same old cycle. So hopefully that helps. All right, next question is, I have an issue with consistency. I do the things to help her just long enough for her to start feeling better. Then I feel like things are going good between us. And then I allow myself to get distracted by whatever's going on in life. And that becomes my focus. Then I slip on helping her heal, which sets us back and leaves her feeling like I don't care enough. What can I do to help me stay on track and be more consistent? Two things. I think it's a great awareness, number one. That's great that you're aware of this. Number one, if there's a lack of consistency, number one, we need a system. What I mean by system is having a routine or a system that helps you do the behavior. Let me give you an example of this. If you're trying to lose 20 pounds, the goal isn't to focus on the goal. I got to lose 20 pounds. The goal is to set the intention out there and then almost forget about it and only focus on the system or your routine or set of behaviors that'll help you achieve the goal. So your system becomes, every lunch I'm having a salad. As soon as I get home from work, or as soon as I finish up at work, my gym clothes are already in the car. I go to the gym for 20 minutes. It's like, and then when I get home, I make myself a protein shake. That's your system. That's your series of behaviors that will enable you to reach the 20-pound weight loss goal. This is no different. So I think you have good insight into the motivation, which is, I'm trying to do this to help her just long enough, or I do that's how it ends up happening. I end up doing it just long enough. So how I hear that is, there's not a system in place that's really there's not an effective system. So this is my encouragement to you, is to build one. It's to identify the specific couple of behaviors that you want to make sure you're focusing on every week or every day. And then finding a time during the day where you can link that behavior with something you're already doing. For instance, one of the clients that I'm working with right now, their system has now become, they have check-in conversations at dinner because they don't have any kids at home. So that just works for them. So every day when they're doing dinner, they pair conversations with something they're already doing into their day. So it becomes a part of their routine. Instead of having to go out of your way and trying and like, oh, this is working. Oh, I can take a break now. That's just, that's a problem of this like up and down, which makes it hard, I think, for both of you. So number one, I would have a system. And those systems need to be refined. I'll share with you another quick example in hopes that this helps to give some ideas. For me, I'm as a Christian, I want to do spiritual reading. I couldn't figure out when to, it's like I wasn't being consistent, even though every day I'm like, oh, I didn't read again. I only read for 10 minutes, which I want to read more than 10 minutes. So I thought, okay, I need to change when I do it because nighttime reading isn't working. So I thought, well, I'm going to read in the morning. And then that didn't really work because then I got my day going and it was just, I was busy. or I had clients in the morning and I just couldn't do it. So I thought, okay, I need to refine this. I'm going to block off my 9 a.m. So as soon as I drop the kids off at school, I come back and it's 9 o'clock. Then I read. I've blocked it off on my calendar. That system has worked excellently, but it took multiple iterations to find that. So it is with you. If you have behaviors that are working, it sounds like you do because she's starting to feel better. It's perfect. I would just really encourage you to build a system around that so that independent of how she feels, you're just doing the system. It's just a daily thing. Independent of what the scale tells me, I'm eating my salad for lunch. So I check this, I check the scale. Wait, I gained a pound? What? No, I'm not doing this anymore. It's not that. We're not linking our system on results. And we want to prolong, I guess that's maybe too narrow of a way to put this. Yes, we need to refine our system based on what happens. But if in one day, I didn't lose a pound, I'm not doing this. It's no, I know this works. I know this is helpful, just like you do. You have some things that are helping. Just do those. Pick out 2 of them. Don't do 30, but like pick out 1 or 2, build a system, and then do that throughout the day. Okay. Second thing that I had, I guess I just kind of touched on it right now. I actually, on my note here, I said, make it even simpler. Do one thing. Instead of doing 5, do literally one thing, but do the most meaningful thing. So given what you know about what's helped her, pick the one that makes the biggest difference. And my encouragement is if you're not sure which one it is, I would encourage you to start with check-ins. Have conversations with her. Make that be the one thing you build a system around, where you do that consistently. And maybe right now you do it every day. And let's say you have to figure this out based on your own schedule, but you can try right when you get home from work if the time is good. For most people, that's not great. You might try when the kids go down if you have kids at home. You might try calling her on your lunch break. You have to play around with what works, but I would focus on one thing. I would dial that in so it becomes consistent because you've paired that conversation with, like my other client, dinner time, or after the kids go down, we walk right into our bedroom and have a conversation. Or we go into the living room, we talk. However you structure that is fine, but find something that will work. Pick the one thing, build the system around it. Then I think you can stay consistent. Oh, you know what I'll say? The last thing that I would say to this, I had a call with somebody yesterday. And he said the same thing. I have a hard time being consistent. And as we did a little digging, I shared with him the system idea. But really, I call this a handbrake, right? You know what to do, but you're not doing it. It's like having the car in drive and your foot is off the gas, right? Or maybe you start to press on the gas. But if your handbrake, your e-brake is on, it's not going to go anywhere. Or if it does, there's grinding and it's bad for the car. So it's either one of 2 things. You don't have a system, or number 2, there's some internal resistance around doing the thing that you know you should do. That's the handbrake. My encouragement for you is to figure out what that handbrake is. If there's an emotional reason why you're not checking in with her, that needs to be solved. Because if I know I need to check in with her, but I feel all this resistance and I procrastinate it, and I know that I don't really want to, and I'll find every excuse in the world to not do it, there's a handbrake on. So pushing through that is not as effective as releasing the brake. So for my client yesterday, it was his shame. He knew he needed to have conversations with his wife, but he wasn't having them because of his shame. He felt bad about himself. When she expressed her pain, he would go into the spot of, I just feel like a bad person. So when we did our work together, that was our focus. I wasn't like, listen, man, you gotta just check in. It doesn't even matter. Push through it. It's not a sustainable strategy. We've got to figure out there's a block there. Let's just get the block out of the way. It's like a river. If you put a dam there, you could, force water. Let's just add more water to it. Or let's break the dam down. Then it naturally will flow through. That'll be your biggest point of leverage. So figure out, what are you resisting? And once you figure that out, then there's a bunch of good things and tools that you can apply to resolve that specific issue. So if you're looking for help, sometimes it's helpful to have somebody do it with you. That's why I think about this guy that I worked with last night. His progress is accelerated because he's getting outside feedback. So if that's you and you're struggling, I'd love to help you. You can post in the group if you have questions, or if you feel like you're wanting to get some therapy or support, let me know and I can share with you some ideas and options. If not, that's totally fine. No pressure at all. But the principle is that find the handbrake, release the handbrake with the right tool. And if you have questions about that, of course, feel free to chat that in the group, and everybody here can support you as well, because maybe somebody has gone through that, or I have some ideas that I can type out. Okay, next question. 2 more. And if, by the way, I see there's some people here, welcome. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. If you have follow-ups, I'm happy to stay on and answer those. Okay, next question. My wife keeps saying that I need to feel her pain. She begs me to take her pain. When we talk, though, I feel like the villain. I've been the villain for 15 months, and I struggle with the shame cycle, right? This is a recurring theme. It's universal. So I hope that what I've talked about today helps. I'm 25 years of being the villain in my relationship. I don't always agree with her point of view, and I don't want to accept being the bad guy, which makes sense. I'm sober, living with integrity, proud of who I am, and I'm constantly feeling like no matter how hard I work, how good I'm doing, I have to step back into being the bad guy to help her. I think most people here can relate to this. It's tough. It's painful. All of what I've said earlier applies to this, so I won't go into a whole lot of depth. It sounds like the cycle conversations where there's accusations and blaming and hurt, anger. That's all the cycle. We've covered that earlier, and those podcast episodes will help. So just to review that, listen to the podcast episodes, have the conversation with her outside of the moment where you guys are discussing your cycle and how it breaks things down, and then try to get out of it by saying, when we talk on this level, we can't find each other. This is what I really would hope. I want to hear your hurt in a vulnerable way. I want to know about your sadness so I can comfort you. But if I hear I'm this awful person, I don't really know what to do with that. I'm doing my very best and I want to support you. Here's one of the ways that I think can help. So I'd have that conversation with her. That's number 2. Number 3, I guess it's more of, again, the same idea. The villain is accusations. The villain is criticism. Vulnerability is how you guys will heal from this. And so we want her to express how she feels vulnerably for 2 reasons. Number 1, you can empathize with sadness. It's hard to empathize with you're a piece of garbage. So it's just the dynamic isn't working. So that's number 1. Number 2, if she shares vulnerably, that means it's like a drawbridge. The drawbridge goes down. That means what she feels comes out, and what you say can actually come in. Because if her drawbridge is up and she's firing arrows at you, it doesn't matter if you have this gift for her. The drawbridge won't let that in. Your gift of compassion and validation will get filtered out by the drawbridge. So it's 2 birds for 1 stone. Her knowing this is important, because we're not just saying, hey, wife, you need to be nice. You need to be nicer to me. You need to talk nicer. That's not what we're going for. We want to get out of our cycles of protection. So the drawbridge comes down so that you can then express compassion and her actually feel that and be moved by that so that she can heal. The last thing that I would encourage you to do is you initiate a conversation with her. And I don't know, maybe you're already doing that, but if not, if she's coming to you and saying how bad she feels and how much you've screwed all this up and how bad of a guy you are, then you want to get out ahead of that. So my encouragement, and this is a universal encouragement that I offer anybody that I work with, you initiate those conversations with her. And you might be thinking, yeah, I've heard that before, but the "yeah, but" tells you there's a handbrake on. Yeah, I know I should do that, but I'm scared we're going to fight. I don't know what to say. When we do start talking about this, I go into my shame. Those are the handbrakes we're talking about. So whatever that is for you, there's a tool to solve that. It's just a matter of getting the tool that you need for the right handbrake. It's like a key, right? There's 3 closed doors. Which key opens up that door? If I feel like I'm back in my shame, what key opens that door? We've covered that earlier. But I'm sharing this with you in hopes that you can start to consider this on your own. Because this work, again, when I'm working with somebody, my goal isn't to It's in a very targeted 12-week process to give you the tools that you need to do this successfully for the rest of your life. It's not traditional therapy where you're going to be doing this for 18 months. It's not uncommon for people to do therapy for this issue for 18 months to 3 years. My goal is to help teach you how to think about these situations so you can problem solve. So these are the principles that I wanted to share with you. Initiate this conversation with her. And if there's a handbrake getting in the way, then that's got to be solved. And again, post in the group if you have more specific questions. When you have a conversation to say, honey, I am thinking about you today. I know that we're not past this. I know that you're carrying, this is literally about, like, if I was in your shoes, I would say these words. I'm thinking about you today. I know that we're not past this. I know that you're probably thinking about this all the time. I just want you to know that I'm aware of that. How you feel matters to me. And I'm thinking about you. Is there anything you want to talk about today? Is there any sadness that you've been feeling? Can I help you? If you have that talk with her consistently, you're getting out ahead of the protection in many cases. So that then when you initiate in that way, you're inviting her to bring the drawbridge down instead of you showing up and it's already there. So that would be my encouragement to you, is have that talk in that way so that then you can express compassion and empathy. And ultimately, again, the key is to get the handbrakes out of the way, because you might already know this, but there's that block. So that would be your action item. All right, last question here. I hope this has been helpful. Drop a comment in the chat. Let me know if it has been. If all of this is terrible and none of this is like helpful at all, that's fine. We'll do less of these. If it's helpful, I'm happy to do more of these. I just want to make sure I'm getting feedback from you guys, because my goal is I just want to help. Okay, last question here, and then I'll see if anybody else has questions, and we can go from there. My wife and I started individual therapy. My counselor recommended Yannick. Okay, super helpful. Thanks so much. All right, thanks, Yannick. Appreciate it. All right, go back to the question here. My wife and I finally started individual therapy. My counselor recommended that she didn't think I was ready for couples counseling on. What's your thoughts on this? Okay, I have a lot of thoughts on this. But if I were to summarize all my thoughts, Yannick, okay, I saw your comment again. You'd love to attend more of these Q&As? Awesome. Okay, I'd love to have more of these. So what do you do here? Literally the entire reason why I started my podcast, which I have been doing for about 2 years now. I'm like 150 episodes in. All of that started from one single reason, which is, in the traditional way of approaching this problem, therapists do not encourage you to do couples work until some undisclosed future point in time. It's he does his work, she does her work, and sometime down the road, you guys come together and figure it out when you're in like a more healthy spot. I could not disagree with that more. Here's why. When there's betrayal in a relationship, the pain, the problem happens between two people. So if I do something to hurt my wife's feelings, I'm the one who can help her feel better faster than anybody else, because it happened between me and her. If your wife hurts your feelings and she comes to you and says, you know what I said was completely out of line. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I didn't mean that. I spoke out of anger. I don't think that you're a bad person. I really do love you. I appreciate your work. Thank you for being patient with me. I just want you to know that I'm not okay with what I said. I really do care about you. Are you okay? It's like almost lightning speed that we feel better. It's somebody saw me. And it's not even just somebody. It's the person who hurt me acknowledged the pain, acknowledged that that wasn't okay. She apologized. It's like almost magic how that conversation has such healing power. So when a therapist says, you're not ready for couples therapy yet, my mind is like, it spins thinking, why would you not want to learn how to do that together. Okay, I think I'm answering my own question here. I think I understand this. Well, yes. So often people, when they think about doing couples therapy, they think about like the traditional, like go on more dates or practice, taking turns speaking or forgive one another. That, I think, in many people's minds is what they think about when they consider couples counseling. In my mind, it doesn't involve any of that stuff. Forgiveness will happen as a natural result of pain being healed. When she feels loved by you and seen, and that her pain matters to you, and you acknowledge that, forgiveness is inevitable. You don't even have to try for that. Just like the example, if your wife comes to you and says all that stuff and like, I really do love you, this is how I was feeling at the time, blah, 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 blah. When you feel seen, it's not like forgive. You don't withhold forgiveness. You want to forgive. You want reconciliation. So couples counseling, in my mind, when I'm working with couples, it's specifically designed to help them repair damage, communicate more effectively, and ultimately find closure between one another. So it has never made sense to me to delay that. It's such a source of comfort and strength and confidence and peace when you know how to come together and find each other in a way that bonds you. So I hope that answers your question. It just depends on what model of couples therapy you do. So the model that I really, really like is what I just discussed. Conversations, helping you come together to have healing conversations. The other model of like reflective listening, all that stuff, those are tactics that don't work for this. It's just the right tool for the right job. That stuff can help for different problems. It's almost like saying, I did a training for some therapists recently about this issue, who they weren't specialized in this, but they wanted to learn, how do I help couples? I'm seeing this a lot. So I did this little training for them. And I said, it's so critical for you to help a man who's struggling with this by knowing why he's struggling, because the why reveals the how to solve it. So if if a husband comes to you and says, at night, that's my biggest trigger. I'm alone. My wife is asleep. My phone is on my bedstand. Then I find myself scrolling Instagram. Then I go down the rabbit hole. If a therapist who doesn't have training thinks, well, okay, if you're struggling because your phone is next to you at night, charge your phone in the bathroom. That'll solve it. But if the reason why he's doing that is because he feels like he's a failure and he's had a horrible day, he just feels bad about himself, the habit level solution, the surface level habit solution, does not solve the underlying problem. It doesn't solve his self-esteem. So that strategy will not work. Will it prevent him from searching on that particular night? Sure, maybe. He could just get up and grab it. The solve is, we got to figure out what the root of the problem is. So all of this is to say, when you guys are considering couples therapy, consider where's the breakdown between you two, then finding the right approach to help you solve that problem. In my mind, couples therapy is so helpful when you're helping people come together in the way that we're talking about today. If you have follow-up questions, let me know. I appreciate your attendance here. Let me know. I know a lot of people will be watching the replay, so feel free to post any follow-up questions, and we'll be sure to do more of these again. It sounds, there's a lot of people who posted questions, so thank you for participating. My goal is to help you guys grow in this community. So thank you for those of you who are engaging and are participating, answering each other's comments, sharing ideas. That's the purpose of all this stuff. So I'd love to pick up where we're leaving off in the next little bit here. We'll do another Q&A, and I would encourage you guys to take everything that we've covered today. We've been going for 48 minutes. Take one thing from this whole session, focus on applying it, get feedback, and then we can just refine how you're approaching all this stuff. Good luck. Pleasure to have you guys all here. Be sure to be in touch, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. Have a good rest of your day.